Hi, this is Jim Gibson. Thank you for joining me today on my channel. Really appreciate it. And today I want to talk about some things that sound like they're contradictory. You know, I was talking to a really smart young man a couple days ago, and he is an avid follower of Dave Ramsey, and he really knows the total money makeover, and he follows every single detail of that total money makeover. And I read that book, more than twice, okay? All the books I talk about today, I've read more than twice, and I'm going to talk about a handful of them. And I started talking to him about Robert Kiyosaki, I think, how you pronounce his name, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad author. I mean, he's brilliant also. But the difference between the two when it deals with debt was disturbing to him. And I said, they're really not. They're not disturbing. And we're going to talk about that and why you need to follow both, okay? But when it comes to Dave Ramsey and his book, Total Money Makeover, and I have his book. I have it on Audible. I've listened to it probably a handful of times. I also had it in print, and I loaned it to someone. I don't remember who I loaned it to, and never got it back. But to make a long story short, Dave has some brilliant ideas there. I mean, these are fantastic. And he's talking to people who are in debt, serious debt. Now, I understand what he's saying because a couple decades ago, back in the 80s, I was in serious debt. I mean, I owed like $40,000 and I was constantly paying these credit cards, trying to pay all my bills on time, trying to pay these credit cards and things like that. And sometimes there wasn't enough money in a month to pay everything that needed to be paid. I would talk to the landlord. I'm sorry, I'm a month behind. I promise you I'll make it up. No matter what, I will pay you, type of thing. And I have that philosophy. You always pay what you owe. And so, I knew I was going to pay every single person. I was going to pay everything. But there was times that it got so tight that at my house, we didn't have food to feed our kids. And I didn't expect anyone else to take care of us. I didn't expect money from the government. And I'm going to do a video on that about money from the government and how it's deceiving. I didn't expect money from the government, and I didn't expect family members to take care of me. And I wasn't going to go around and claim I was a victim. It was my fault that we got ourselves in that type of predicament where we couldn't afford just to buy basic foods. And if it wasn't for the church down the street that every once in a while would bring by food that was left over from the fellowship dinner, and that food was great. That was fantastic. It would last a couple of days. You ever have chicken for breakfast? But it's food, and I made sure my kids never missed a meal. But sometimes on Monday morning, and I remember thinking about that, I have a whole week that I got to drive a car to work, and I have $5. That's it. That's all I have, $5 for gasoline. I have no more. So I was in a pretty desperate spot back then. And I'm going to do a video on this, by the way, how I got out of it and all the details and stuff like that. And that's maybe my next video. I don't know. But I'm going to actually talk about the details, some more details. But the bottom line is I followed a person named Ron Blue. Now, Ron Blue is a lot like Dave Ramsey. And so when I read Dave Ramsey's book, I see the same philosophy. And you should read Dave Ramsey's book. So some of the things I've learned in Dave Ramsey's book. Well, debt is bad. Credit cards are bad because you owe money. And there's a lot going on there. And if you want to get out of debt, and this is what I learned from Ron, and I also learned, I kept it with Dave, is that you take your smallest debt, most of the time it's a credit card debt, and I had like 5-8 credit cards back then, and they were all maxed out. Said you take your smallest debt and you pay it off. And then you take all that money that you have, that extra money you have from paying off that one credit card, you put that credit card aside or you destroy it or whatever, you put that aside, and then you take that money and you attack the second largest credit card. And my wife and I did that. We got all our credit cards caught up, and we made a promise to each other that we'd never put money on a credit card unless we could pay it off by the end of the month. And if we weren't able, because of finances, to pay off that credit card by the end of the month, then that credit card was no longer used. It was destroyed. And we lost the ability to use that credit card. So we've had that principle for decades now, and it's worked for us well. Never put money on a credit card that you can't pay off at the end of the month. That was our philosophy. Now, Dave Ramsey is the other, pretty stronger than that. He says, have a debit card. Don't use credit cards. Just use a debit card and use cash. And I agree with him. This is a fantastic idea, and it's great, and it really works, especially in the situation I found myself in, and from others that have talked to me about, Dave Ramsey's concept. Fantastic concept. I can't say anything bad about it, okay? This is fantastic. And my wife and I worked through all our credit cards, and we worked on the car payment. And then once we got the car payment, we worked on the house payment. We paid off a house, which was like, wow, unbelievable. Well, that's Dave Ramsey, okay? Now, Kiyosaki, gosh, Rich Dad, Poor Dad guy. How's that? Robert Kiyosaki. And I'm looking at his book. I actually had a hard copy of this book, and I loaned it to someone as I did my other books, and they've disappeared. But that's okay. This is a CD. My new truck doesn't have a CD player in it, so if I want to listen to this again, I probably will. I'll just get it on Audible and listen to it like 10 times. I've already listened to this probably 10 times. But anyway, he has the opposite. He says, don't keep cash. Get out of your cash position as fast as possible and invest it. And I think primarily he talks about real estate, investing it in real estate. And he's right also, okay? So I've been on both sides at the same time. So how did I justify that? Well, when I listen to Dave Ramsey, he's talking about baby steps. And he's talking about people who are deeply in debt and things like that. When I listen to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he's talking about investors. So if you owe on credit cards and you don't own your own house, and a lot of other parameters here, personal finance parameters, then you shouldn't be an investor, period. That's how I cover both of them. And both of them are right, and I do agree with Robert Kiyosaki. I'm sorry, because he's brilliant. He really is. He's really helped me out in many ways. I've listened to him, and he's given me a really good philosophy of business, of investing, things like that. And so has Dave Ramsey. So personally, in my personal life, I follow Dave Ramsey with personal finance. In business, I follow Rich Dad, Poor Dad philosophy. And let me give you an example. And so when money was cheap and they were giving it away, I bought some houses. And I got the 3% mortgage. Man, listen, if you have a 3% mortgage, and right now, I knew inflation was going to come, and we can talk about that some other time. But I was already aware that there was going to be a bust in the housing market, and that inflation was going to take over pretty seriously. But if you have a 7% inflation and you're paying back a loan of 3%, there's no motivation for me to pay it back early, because I'd rather take that money that I would spend on paying off that mortgage of an investment property. I'd rather take that money and invest it in another investment property as a down payment. So that's how I feel, and I agree with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki on these issues. I think he's brilliant on these issues, and he's right. Now, that's my philosophy. He's right. So I was talking to my friend, and I was saying, look, your house is just about paid off. That's fantastic. Are you going to start investing? And he goes, well, I'm going to start saving to invest. Normally, that's, in my opinion, that's not a good step to go. You should save for your down payment on your investment and let your renters pay the house off. So, but right now, with houses getting more and more are dropping in price, and I'm going to do a video on that also. But the ones that are dropping in price left and right every day, it seems like, it's not a good time to buy. So I do agree with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Cash isn't that great either, and I'll tell you the reason why. If you have enough to buy a house, or it loses its value every month. But if you're in real estate and the real estate is dropping like a rock, then that's an issue also. So you have to decide whether you keep it in cash or you keep it in real estate. Now for me, I'm not comfortable taking all my cash and investing it in real estate. It doesn't work for me. I always need a cushion, and I did that in business for many years. I owned a business for 40 years, or been in IT for 40, owned a business for 30. It was a national business. I always paid my debt, my bills, the invoices. I always paid them either on time or as soon as before they were due. So some people did work for me, and I knew the work was done and it was satisfactory. I paid the invoice. Now, once in a while I screwed up where somehow accounting screwed up. But my philosophy was that when someone does the work, you pay them, period. And you don't need to wait 30 days and float their money. I'm not interested in floating money in the business. So when I was in business, I always handled it that way. Now, what I did in business is I always had a cushion. And so I always had at least 3 months, and most of the time 6 months worth of a cushion. So if you're going to go into business, you might want to try this philosophy. It really worked well for me for many years. And what I would do is save. At the beginning, I would save. No vacations, no luxuries, no new cars, things like that. Rarely pay myself, or if I paid myself the minimum. And I took all that money and I put it in reserves in my business. And so I knew that each night when I went home that night, I could fall asleep comfortably because I didn't have to worry about whether I had enough money to pay the bills. Because sometimes in business it goes up and it goes down, it goes up, especially if you're in contracting. Sometimes you got a lot of work, and other times you have very little work, and it goes up and down. Sometimes everyone pays on time, other times people default and they don't pay their bills, and it happens. It seems like it happens in clusters, to be honest with you. But I always kept enough in the bank, and I looked at it every single day. How much money do I have in the bank? How much money did I invoice that day? Things like that. So I knew my cash flow, and I always had enough money that if the world went south and all I could do was have all my technicians and employees sit around and drink coffee, I could pay them for at least 3 months, and I could pay all my bills. I could pay my rent. Actually, it wasn't rent, it was mortgage on my building. I could pay their health insurance. I could pay the electricity. I could pay workers' comp and all the other insurances that are out there. So I could pay all that stuff for 3 months without getting a dime through the front door. And that was my goal. And that gave me, in my opinion, that gave me a peace of mind when I was going to sleep at night, because I never thought, oh, tomorrow I better get money or I got to pay this bill. You know, I heard a guy who started a business, and he made lots of money in the business. And he sold it. He sold to a big corporation, and I can't remember what. And he said, man, I am so glad I sold that. For 20 years, all I did was every night I sweat over I could pay my bills the next day. And you know something? Never sweat. I always had the money. Always knew I had the money. Sometimes that account would go up and down, and it would fluctuate between 6 months and 3 months, but I knew it was no big deal. And I didn't spend that money. I didn't sit there and say, wow, I'm going to get myself a really fancy Lamborghini and drive around and let everyone go, oh, he's rich. Isn't he successful? No, I didn't do that. I kept it in the bank, and I kept it liquid. So I knew I could pay off my debt at any time. I could pay salaries and things like that. Never missed a payroll, and paid all my bills on time or ahead of time. So that's how I handled my business. So in a lot of ways, that's a Dave Ramsey approach to business. But at the same time, when I had real estate, so when I go out and I look at a building, like even my warehouse that I had purchased was close to $1 million. And I saved up enough money for a serious down payment on that. And in cash, after I paid my taxes, everything else, I had enough that I could put a serious down payment. It took me a couple years to do that, by the way. You know, Dave Ramsey type of thing, where you're saving money to buy. But I knew that I had 3 locations at the time, and each of those locations together were more than what my mortgage payment would be on one large warehouse with office space. And I realize from generally speaking, when it comes to real estate, it's always getting better or more valuable over time. Now, it's going to drop now. I understand that. So, if you're thinking about real estate today, now's not the time to buy. But back then, 20 years ago, that was the time to buy real estate. It was constantly increasing, and I'm talking after 2008. So after 2008, I bought some property because the value dropped, or not the value, but the asking price dropped seriously. So to make a long story short, so I ran my personal finance and my business finance like Dave Ramsey, Total Money Makeover. Everything was paid off every month, and I had enough reserves to cover me for 6 months. However, when I do real estate, I do Rich Dad, Poor Dad philosophy. And I do agree with him that, you get a mortgage and you get your renters to pay off the mortgage, and that's worked really well for me. But at the same time, in that business, that real estate business I have enough to cover all my expenses for a long time. So if someone decides to leave, someone decides to walk out at 12 o'clock at night and not honor their lease, well, I'm not going to go bankrupt. How's that? I'm probably not going to make money on that house for a year or two, but I'm not going to go bankrupt. But the bottom line is I have other people paying off that house, and the money I'm making on those properties, I'm taking and I'm reinvesting in real estate. And to me, it's been a good return. There's a lot of tax advantages to that and everything else. But if I waited, the original purchase of my warehouse, if I waited until I had $1 million in the bank before I bought that property, then you know what the problem would have been? I would have lost a ton of money on rent. Paying other people, the other 3 facilities, to use their other, facilities. Robert Kiyosaki is absolutely right in what he says, and I take that as my investment philosophy for real estate, and it's worked out really well for the last 25 years. At the same time, I also mix in the Total Money our Money Makeover, Dave Ramsey's ideas, which are brilliant. Both men are brilliant, by the way. I really like anything they produce. I buy when it comes to books and learning. Remember, if you're going to be in business, if you're going to be investing, then you need to read these type of books, and more than once. Okay. Listen, I got a master's in business administration. Okay, I learned some things there. That was fine. So what? But I tell you where I really learned is by listening to other people who are first generation wealth builders and wrote books on how they did it. And I learned from those individuals on different things. So some of the books: Guide to Investing with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I guess I should say first Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then I got all these CDs back when the CDs were the thing, And again, I got a new truck that I paid for in cash, by the way. And I got, but I don't have a CD in my new truck, so I don't, But something else? He has other things in here. He has these people that work with him, Rich Dad advisors and real estate loopholes. Look, if you're going to be in real estate, especially if you're going to be in real estate, you better read some of these books, okay? And I'll put them all down in the description area, so you can actually read them yourself. Now, I've had many other books, and I've loaned them out and never got them back. So I really like Audible, and so I have a lot of books on Audible. When it comes to Dave Ramsey, I have Entree Leadership, Everyday Millionaires, Total Money Makeover. The guy is brilliant. You need to read his stuff, man. If you want to be in business, read his stuff. It's not going to tell you how to do QuickBooks or how to make financial decisions. It's going to give you a philosophy that's going to help you earn money. So And I tell you what, that Total Money Makeover is a fantastic book. And I also like Entre Leadership. And I had hard copies of these things, okay? But I went to Audible and I bought the Audible stuff and I listened to it more than once. With Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. Obviously, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I could read that even again. That is so brilliant. It gives me encouragement when he speaks. But some of the other things that I actually have on Audible is ABCs of Property Management. Now, some of these, I think it was ABCs of Property Management. I own it not only in Audible, but I own the book. I just can't find the book. And I want to read it again. And the book had so many details, that and Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright, which is associated with Robert Kiyosaki. I would highlight these things, and then I would go talk to the people doing my taxes and say, how about this, how about that, I've learned this, I've learned that. You know, I paid attention. You learn like that. So anything these two gentlemen write, I pay attention to. I study, I read. Plus you got YouTube. You know, you learn a lot from YouTube, and I hope you're learning a lot from this YouTube. Now, some other things I've learned just really quick. E-Myth, you got to read the E-Myth if you're in business, man. This is fantastic. This may help you stay in business. And this is one of the fantastic ones. Michael Gerber. Actually, he lives like a mile from me here in California. This is worth its weight in gold. And then, you know, I read some of these things from Nolo. I don't know. Being a business owner, I read Deduct It, and I've learned a lot of lessons. I saved some taxes this year. I had to tell the tax person that about some things that he did not know, not from the book, but he didn't know that I was doing that had a tax advantage for me, pay less taxes, that is. And then if you're going to be in the what do you call it? In real estate, and you're going to be leasing out, you better get this and read it. You know, I know it's long, but you know something? If it saves you a lawsuit, and at the same time it makes, you know, you're able to make more money, it's worth every dime you pay for this. So don't waste your time with fiction. You know, these love stories, you know, this person said this person did that, and they love each other and they kiss each other. You know, that's a bunch of nonsense. You're wasting your life, man. Go with nonfiction. Learn about things. Learn about life, everything else. Now, one of the coolest ones I read, and this is old. This is really old. Is from Zig Ziglar, Meet You at the Top. And I bought this in 1986. And this was one of the catalysts for me to get my financial life together. I mean, this guy's great. Now, he's not going to tell you all the details about finance and invest here and invest there. He's not going to tell you that. But Zig Ziglar is fantastic, and you can learn a lot from him just in this one book, See You at the Top. And I'll put all these at the bottom. I don't know if they even have these anymore. I think I have a copy, another copy of these. But anyway, I'll put them all at the bottom there. You can read it yourself. And then my thing too is if you want to learn the overall stuff when it comes to being successful financially, I can't overlook the Bible and some of the business. There's a lot of business concepts in the Bible, in Proverbs, in the New and Old Testament. You can learn a lot if you study it, if you understand it. There's a lot of principles there. So to make a long story short, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not in conflict, in my opinion, with Total Money Makeover. Both of them have different areas for their application. Thank you for watching. Whoa. Don't go. Please subscribe and like. I should have said this earlier, you know. Please give me a thumbs up, okay? And subscribe. And refer this and make a comment. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you, you know, because I'm still learning. I'm going to be learning the rest of my life. And I'm happy to learn something new. Thank you for watching. You have a great day.